I'd like to welcome you all to our April Tax Day celebration, which we thought, what better way to celebrate Tax Day than to talk about data. We have Doug Tomo, who's actually going to be doing most of the presentation today, talking about corporate data, keeping it healthy and all that good fun stuff. So, but otherwise, Doug, I'm going to let you take it away.
Very good, Bob.
Have fun.
Thank you. Okay, what is healthy corporate data? We have a thought here at Simplex that you have three pillars of good data. There is an enormous amount of data in the world these days. Nearly every single device, every computer, everything out there is either capturing or attempting to manage the data that is captured throughout there. But how much of it is good? If we look at our phone bill, generally that's good data. If we look at some of the data laying around the office that we're told to integrate with another system or to produce meaningful information out of, often it is not very good data. Well, from our perspective, good data has three qualities. It has health. We're going to discuss that in further detail as we go through this today. But the main point of healthy data is, can you use it when you want to use it? Is it really usable? That's way different than does it exist. Okay, performance. Are we waiting on the data? Is the data serving us, or are we serving the data? How long do we have to wait for it to come to us? How hard is it to get out? Okay, usefulness. Does the data serve its intended purpose, and can it serve any other purposes as well? For example, most of us have a phone, and a phone can track contacts. But would your phone contacts be the best place to store your company contacts? I'll bet we have our company contacts there, but it might not be the right place for it. Anyhow, there's usefulness to the contacts, okay? And we want to take that same analogy and look at the future usefulness of other data that we have already. Okay, so from a IT perspective, and you'll find that Simplex talks IT perspective and business perspective. Typically when Bob interjects, and I'm sure he's getting ready to, I see the look, it is from the IT perspective. And I wasn't just schmoozing when I said I enjoy working with Bob. Bob has a very good perspective on IT. And that's basically step back, forget the technology, and look at the business purpose of why we're using the technology. Because that often, if you can stay tuned into that, that will help you make sense of all the bits and bytes and various options that we have. And these days we have more options than ever for processing our data. Also more opportunity for creating healthy data or avoiding creating unhealthy data. So from a typical corporate perspective, healthy data is going to involve integrity. Does the data really represent what it thinks it does? Is it a customer order? Is it a shipment? Or my favorite, is it a partial customer order? Or maybe a partial shipment? Okay, not only that, integrity also relates to how it's stored. Is it stored in a meaningful way, in a reliable medium, that we can bring it back in the future, and the data represents what it did when we first stored it? I don't know how many of us know this, but remember when CDs first came out? We were told they were indestructible and they would last forever. Is that true? What happens to a CD with data on it?
You can step on them.
That is true. The medium itself can become corrupt. It can become damaged. Sometimes I pull them out of my storage container and they're cracked. That's no good. There's another thing out there, a concept that's known as bit rot. Data degrades as it stays in storage. We don't have that problem too much on a day-to-day basis with our hard disk drives, but that's only because we don't use our hard disk drives very long. We use them maybe 5 years, maybe 1 year, depending on what they are. But I'm fairly certain if we tuck away our DVD backup of our data and come back in 20 years, you will not be able to use it. There's all kinds of studies in that, not that I can quote any of them, but I've read on it enough. Data rots just by existing on some type of storage medium. So one thing we want to take away from that is we want to change our storage medium. What is storage medium? It's a disk drive usually. Okay? Backups. Our data is no good if it's at risk from outside people, from accidents, or from our own employees making mistakes. I got to spend the morning with Bob, and it was enjoyable. Bob got a little bit flustered today. He was having some computer problems. Okay, Bob could have easily clicked the wrong button in an application and deleted some data. Could we have recovered from that? Healthy data you can recover from expected and unexpected accidents, and the place we go to for that is our backups. Okay, security. Healthy data will be secure. What's the definition of security? Anyone? Kevin?
Not letting people get to stuff that they're not supposed to.
I like that. And Zoe, what's the opposite of that?
Security.
The opposite of Kevin's answer. Yes, this is unfair to ask you. It's
Letting someone,
okay.
letting everyone in.
Correct. That's it. Exactly. So security is really as simple, again, from a business perspective. Forget the technology, forget the permissions on files or the database users or anything like that. It's letting in who you want and keeping out who shouldn't be in there. These days we have protected data, we have healthcare data, we all have electronic medical records these days. Okay, there is security that's applied to all that. If our healthcare data is healthy out there, it will have the appropriate security for the doctors and other providers to get to and to keep the identity thieves and such out of it. Okay, availability. That's my favorite topic, and I spend an awful lot of time doing this on site at clients. Availability is making the data available when you need it. That's different than recovering from an error or a mistake, which backups take care of. Availability handles things like, oh my gosh, the system doesn't work today. How do we get our customer shipments out the door? Okay, there's a variety of ways that you handle data availability, but it basically comes down to having two for anything that you need to do. We call them redundant systems. We call them highly available systems. Sometimes they're called clusters. These are all words that are out there in the IT industry. But again, stepping back, using the simplex IT perspective of technology, the business perspective is have more than one place that we could get it. That vastly increases our chance of the data being available when we want it. Okay, our definition of healthy data will depend upon the intended usage of that data. For example, are we using it to process transactions? Are we using it for reporting? Typically, the requirements for reporting are less than that for transaction processing. And transaction processing is just doing our day-to-day business, such as taking an order, making a shipment, sending a package somewhere. Okay, typically there are lots of data items, fields we call them, that we track when we're doing transaction processing. When we're doing reporting, though, we want a higher level perspective, usually for management. And they want to summarize the data. And you can't summarize data if you include every field that you have on an order. So you look for the high level things, order date, customer ID, order quantity, things like that. But what we intend to use the data for has a big impact on whether the data is considered healthy or not, because it raises our expectation of what that data is going to do. Then the most important thing, and ladies, I heard you talking at the beginning of the webinar, you're integrating, you're updating systems and things like that. What we all want to do is think about the future. It's hard to do. Budgets are tight. Staff is very lean in most companies these days, but we want to try to future-proof our data. We want it to be usable not only today, but in the future. But Bob, I don't know what I'm going to be doing with it in the future. I know. It doesn't matter, because the qualities of good data aren't dependent on knowing the exact details of it. It's actually the foundation of it. Is it accurate? Can it be saved? Is it flexible enough? Things like that. Okay, data integrity. You guys, I'm a full-time DBA and I work with lots of data. I'm not kidding about the dungeon. Often we like to be in quiet rooms. It's actually called the data center. But typically the door is locked and there's gobs and gobs of data. I mean, millions of records a day. So if you hear me interject database for data, it's really the same thing. But your data can be in all kinds of formats. It can be in Excel files, Access files, QuickBooks data files, SQL Server, Oracle, SAP, PeopleSoft. In the end, though, it doesn't matter because what we talk about here applies to all of it. Okay, when's the last time anyone checked if their database was corrupt or their data was corrupt? Kevin, I know you did. You talked about that project with me. Right. Who uses QuickBooks? Okay, first time I ever got that. I'm the only one. QuickBooks, if you go to do a backup, the very first question it asks you, do you want me to confirm the integrity of your data? That's a database integrity check. Although it's just a single file, it's still a database. Okay? How many people have worked with systems that allow you to save a record without required fields being in place? Imagine going to your doctor. I just read an article on this today with the electronic medical records. There was such a push to get them out there, and they had to add new features because of regulation from CMS and other government agencies, that they put the program in, they added all the functionality, and I don't know if you ever go to your provider, but they walk in with the laptop and they don't really have time to talk to us anymore because they're focused on getting the required fields in. I used to cringe at that, but the more I thought about it, that's okay, because at least the required fields are getting put in the system. There's nothing worse than partial data in a system. What it does is it just takes away all your time and you go on this endless chase for where did it come from, what does it mean, is it important? So completed data, completed transactions are part of data integrity. How about the same field having a different name on two different screens in an application? That's particularly troublesome to me, but it happens more and more these days because what happens is typically good software comes from small, motivated companies. Small group of people, 3 to 4 people work together. They put together something, maybe they offer it for free a while on the web, millions of people sign up for it, and then a big company comes along and makes them millionaires and buys their product. What the big company inevitably does then is focus on increasing the market beyond what the original intent of the application was. They're increasing their scope, they add features, different programmers. Your customer might be as simple as having a customer ID field on one screen, having a customer number on a different screen. Okay, we as operators can handle that. What's it like in the database? What's it like when the person eventually 2 years from now goes down to run a report, not only with the existing data, but with all the new data with the new features? Those are issues. They affect data integrity. What if the customer number gets changed? What if we track it with numbers over here and letters over there? Okay, backups. Backups are absolutely mandatory. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Backups must be confirmed. Has anyone, Kevin, had a backup that was not usable?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because the backup really isn't proven to be usable until we restore it. Unfortunately, restoring it means overwriting our data or having a spare system. These days, it's a lot easier to have the mechanism to test your backups with virtualization, which allows us to create basically real quick copies of machines, as well as other great benefits. But you cannot count on your backup to be there for you unless you restore it. You need to check when you take the backup if you got errors. You need to restore it. That is the only way to know. My experience has been that roughly, this is a little bit dated, so it's probably better now, 80 to 90% of all backups are just taking up space and they're not really usable. Okay, an SQL server or a QuickBooks data file backup is not the same as a server backup. So let's say that we lost our database server, and Ala was nice enough to make sure that the SQL server backups, whether it's Oracle or Microsoft, we're taking, and Doug, I verified him, he told me, and I say great. And then the server's gone. Do we have a backup of the entire server? Because we can't get to our data now unless we have SQL Server or Oracle running. Just important, we're not here to teach you how to do that kind of stuff, although it's not that hard these days. There's wonderful tools for it. But you have to keep in mind the database backup is separate from the server backup. So if the system admins at your organization say we've got that covered with server backups, please drill into that and find out, because your database backups must exist independent of those. What I like to do is have more than. let them take whatever they want, and then make my own copies. Recovery needs. That's tough. When I first got into all this data, I struggled with it because I came from the IT world where there's a backup and there's a restore. Now we talk about availability. It's like, yeah, I'm here to do the work. Oh no, system availability. Okay, recovery. Recovery is one of these misused words, meaning it's used in different contexts accurately, but it's used across so many of them, it's hard to know what someone's talking about. We're talking about the ability to recover your data when you have a problem. Okay, when your database first starts up, it typically goes through a recovery cycle automatically. It's that important. It checks the integrity of it. It looks for partial transactions. It gets rid of what it needs to, and it applies what it can. It's so important it happens automatically, and we don't even know about it. But we just need to tune into a little bit of that is one of the qualities of a good backup is understanding how our recovery works. If we lose the database, we follow this procedure. We lose the server, we follow that procedure. Honestly, QuickBooks is a good example because it has a lot of functionality. It's pervasive out there. A lot of people use it. And it's pretty much 3 files. But everything I said applies to that as well. How are you going to back up those 3 files? Most of us, we could fit on a DVD, but if we're a large company, we can't. But I just said we can't put it on the shelf and think that we're done. We need something that's more robust, another way of doing it. We need to check the integrity of QuickBooks. We need to back it up. Same thing applies whether it's an Excel spreadsheet or an Oracle database. It's the same because we're focused on the data.
Actually, I want to jump in on this one. Can you go back? This is a big issue here from a business standpoint, and for years we talked about the concept of disaster recovery. The disaster recovery is there's some kind of outage, whether the outage is data loss, hardware loss, system integrity, anything along those lines. How long are we going to be offline before we're back in business? So it was a bad thing happen, as opposed to now we talk about it as a business continuity. Business continuity is that there is no significant interruption of business. It can still go because the tools were already in place for us to either fail over to other hardware, fail over to other software, fail over to cloud, fail over to the backups. The problem is that in a lot of cases, companies don't review what their strategy is in terms of what is the loss. If there is an outage for an hour of data, what is the loss? What is the business cost? If you don't have that information, it's very hard to have a successful strategy in place that's tested, because what's going to happen is the geeks are going to implement the strategy. And the geeks implementing the strategy is not a good business solution. And especially when you start talking about different versions of SQL, or Oracle for that matter, each version, one of the biggest add-ons that happened from SQL 2000, 2005, 8, 14, whatever version we're on now.
Right.
Every one of them have increased either the high availability or the recovery options that in some cases have to be tied to the applications as well, but you need to have that strategy in place. If that strategy isn't in place, then you don't have a strategy. So I just wanted to make sure from a business standpoint as well as the technical that part's understood.
Very good, Bob. Very good point. Along that line, when you're taking your backups, you need to know if your application can use your backups. If you call tech support for many vendors and you ask them, can you use a point-in-time restore? That's a feature that almost all databases have that will allow you to restore up to 1 minute, roughly, before there was a crash of the server. Many, many applications will tell you, no, what we want you to do is restore last night's full backup, because it involves a level of commitment to their platform that many vendors don't do these days. You need to check with the application vendor whether they can use the type of backups that you're taking as well. Bob's very right too. Everyone here is very technical, everyone is very competent, and I enjoy this, but frankly, unless they know your business strategy, the backup that they put in will accommodate recovery, but might not accommodate recovery in the best way for your business. We get calls all the time, got one just this morning. IT provider has backups in place, but when the customer went to use them, They didn't quite meet the business scenario that they were looking for. Business and technology very much interwoven these days. A lot of tech out there, not everyone focusing on the business side of it. That's what you have to do. We don't have to get down and do the down and dirty stuff anymore, but we have to make sure we understand it enough and confirm that it meets our business needs. Okay, security. There's the definition, Zoe, I was looking for before. Let the good people in, keep the other ones out. Okay, we have application level security, meaning that we go into our day-to-day application and we say, okay, I'm going to let Bob in, I'm going to keep Kevin out. We have database level security where we could say, okay, Zoe can see the orders, but Allah cannot. He can see the shipments only. Okay? We also have more and more people that need to access other companies' data. I was horrified 3 years ago. I'm in a manufacturing company, and there's this, to me, I reported as a rogue connection to the server sucking data off of it. No, it turned out it was one of their providers, one of their partners. But the business unit had implemented it, and the IT department didn't know about it. So we now had an external system coming in and pulling data across the internet every day. Unfortunately, it was a heavy load of data, so it caused performance. That's performance issues. That's how we caught it. But it points out a good topic that we need to keep in mind is that it's not just us anymore. Every company is lean. Every company is getting by. Most of us are doing 5-person's jobs from 10 years ago. If you look back, there's not nearly as many people in the workforce anymore, and we're still doing all the work. So we have external parties. We need to keep a particularly close eye on what they're doing, the permissions that we grant them. And I can tell you firsthand, when installers are working, if things don't work, they elevate permissions so that things work. The thing is, they don't always remember at the end of the project to circle back and tighten them back down. That's what we have to stay tuned into. Okay, and from a geek perspective, security has 2 main components as far as when you're connecting to a system. Authentication, which is who am I? And then authorization, which is what am I allowed to do? It's important not to share passwords, not to share logins and things like that, because that's where authentication and authorization gets confused. It's Kevin, but he's logging on as Allah. Allah has different permissions than Kevin. Gets gummed up that way.
One more thing I want to add on this one too. Keep in mind that there are 2 trends that are happening that affect this issue. Trend number 1 is, like I say, external access needs, new security needs. More and more companies are either connecting externally with their customer base, they're connecting externally with their vendors, or they're connecting externally with their employees. Because we want people to get data, to get information as quickly as possible. Those are absolutely great things because they increase the productivity, they decrease the turnaround time for issues or questions or orders. Absolutely fantastic, but they can't be done unless you have an opening in your network, the ability for someone externally to connect to it. And the other thing on the side is that the tools that the bad guys are using are getting smarter and smarter and more automated, so that they can, we used to basically say, oh, no one's going to find that. They're not going to find that opening. They're not going to be able to see that opening. Well, now there's bots who are literally just cruising every IP address, checking the ports, all that kind of fun stuff, that it's no longer the case. And the whole idea of, well, no one really wants our data because we're a small company, that's not true anymore, because there's more and more automated security exploits that actually can generate revenue for the bad guys, whether you look at ransomware or things along those lines. So it's becoming more and more important to pay attention to this, even though it's not fun.
Absolutely. The quality of the bad guy tools is significant. These are kits that you can buy for roughly $225, professionally written. All you have to do is have bad motives. The good code is already out there. It's frightening. Okay, data availability. Is our responsiveness appropriate to our needs? Okay, and I like to give the example of when you're talking on the phone with the customer, you want your data to come up as quickly as possible. Absolutely. But that's different than the needs that you have for generating a report. A good test of this is, do you become impatient while you're waiting for your data, no matter what you're doing. Every phone we've ever bought over the last 4 years, faster, faster, faster. Why? The texts have always flown. The calls have always been made. As far as I know, the emails have always gone. Why? Because we want it faster, faster, faster. Okay, now that's phone, that's personal, etc. The thing is, our business has similar characteristics. We generally want the data to come up fast enough to be available so that we could service our customers efficiently and process more orders. Okay, can anyone just out of the blue define what they consider to be slow? That's tough because it's relative. Just in the example before, we want to be able to service our customers quickly. What if it's an irate customer? Not that any of us ever have those, but like in McDonald's, I watch them and I'm in awe with what McDonald's has done. They are a data processing entity and they still serve the exact same quality food everywhere I go. Anywhere I go, a Big Mac tastes like a Big Mac. Yet they can take the order here, they could run around, do a bunch of things, and back there it comes out exactly what I ordered, time and time again. They've got this part down. They know how to make their data available when it needs to be. Now, I don't know what their reporting is like late at night or quarterly or things like that. They probably have some pretty big hardware behind that. But we need to keep in mind that slow is relative, but in general, it's not good because we don't have much patience. We don't have much patience because we don't have all day to do anything anymore. Most people multitask. It's the whole reason Windows became popular. 2 windows. Most of us have 20 or 30, open at any given time. Okay. As far as data availability, you need to take a good hard look at should you have a highly available data platform. I was saying before, hinting at what it is, that's more than one server, and they work together. We put in failover clusters frequently. We put in redundancy. Most of the storage solutions that we have redundancy, typically called RAID, so that if one component fails, the others can take over for it. I'm very proud that we can build solutions that if this server goes down, within 20 seconds, the data is available on the other one. If it's set up properly, your users don't even know and they automatically connect to it. That's a very good approach. But it takes a little bit of budget. Not all of us can do that right away, but it's something to keep in mind. The data availability depends on the system availability. Okay, some of the benefits we could expect when we achieve healthy corporate data is servicing customers more quickly. It meets our core business needs, it meets management's needs, and we can answer those one-off questions that any of us data people get hit with endlessly. I don't know why they think I know everything, I don't. But because I'm near the data, they ask me all kinds of questions. Well, usually you don't have a report for that, so you have to write a query or dig around or try to get a custom report for it. We call those ad hoc inquiries. Okay, future proofing. Can the data be used for future purposes? Because we want to capture emerging business opportunities, because frankly, if we stay the same, we're going to be out of business. Every company must move forward in time. The big example that a lot of people give over time is the buggy whips. The best buggy whip manufacturer back in the day is no longer with us. And then emerging technology. I have to say that I'm amazed at the changes in technology. And I'm relatively slow to change because I want things to be stable, reliable. I want those 3 pillars right there. But some of the technology is so compelling these days that you really need to look at it. For example, the benefits of virtualization. It's astonishing. It's another level of complexity. It's a whole nother skill set, but it gives you flexibility in ways that you cannot even imagine. The cloud and having your computers in the cloud. Horrifying thought to me. I've argued with Bob about this many times. For the right application, though, it's exactly what you need.
And one of the challenges on this is that right now, when you talk about high availability, you talk about all of these issues, we're living in a ridiculously solution-rich environment. There are so many ways to accomplish these things. Some have low cost, some have high cost, some have a certain feature set, some have ridiculous feature sets, some are easy, some are complicated. But it's hard to understand which strategies to implement and which tools to use. And that's part of the challenge that people are facing now.
Absolutely. Key point is focus on the business side of it, because there's a lot of providers out here that know the technical details. They're never going to know your business the way you do. Okay, how do we go about achieving healthy corporate data? Zoe, the answer's on the screen.
Do you want me to read it?
Correct. A corporate data review is the starting point. Well, what's that? Well, that was last week's webinar. For any of you that missed it, a corporate data review is actually just the process of sitting down, hopefully when nothing else is going on, and thinking about the data in your organization. Think about where it comes from, where it rests, where it flows. This is important. You do not need an auditor to come in. You do not need expensive tools. No one knows your data better than you if you'll let yourself know it. I could sit here and I could say, I don't know how QuickBooks works, but if I think about it as I'm using it, I can absolutely figure out how it does. Mostly because I spend a lot of time doing that kind of stuff. But a corporate data review is where you look at the data that you have, what type of data it is, how it's used in the organization, and then start thinking of opportunities that you have that you could let the data interact with other people, other systems, other processes. Okay, you can definitely do it yourself. Do not be intimidated into thinking you can. Or you can get help. An outside entity can come in and they can use some automated tools and they could help gather more data in a few minutes of talking with you than is, I mean, it's mind-boggling how much data can be automatically collected, but it still doesn't have the context. The context that only you understand as the business owner or the guardian of the business data, which most of us serve as. You understand the context of it. Is it appropriate in this context or not appropriate in it?
Yeah, there's really three aspects of that. Aspect number one, of course, is the static inventory. What hardware is there? What are the attributes of the hardware? What versions is it running? So on and so forth. Those are pretty easy to get. There's inventory systems if you don't have already that, or systems that'll gather the inventory if you don't already have that information. And if you don't, you really should. The second is more dynamic. How is the system normally performing? What kind of traffic is going on? Between whom? Between systems, between users, all of that kind of fun stuff. And then the third, as Doug's talking about, that's where you actually sit down and get into more of the soft issues. What is the business needs? What's the reliability? And that sort of thing. Told you I was going to shut up.
I know, I like that. Soft issues, that's very true. They seem hard, but they're not. Okay, why do we have unhealthy data? I'd like to describe where unhealthy data comes from. I know this for a fact. Okay, unhealthy data comes because people are focused on doing their job and they do it accurately. In a nutshell, that's it. And you're thinking, what? How can that be? No, it's got to be people not doing their job. Not always. Let's look at a typical project. We have a business need and someone decides to fund it. There's X amount of dollars in the budget. Let's say a third party is hired to implement it. Third party has to come along. They have to get their bid approved. They're accepted. Then they have to start to get to know the environment, the systems, the people, the processes, the database. Absolutely, they need to. Then they look at their requirements document, or you could think of it as specs for the project. They go, we can do all that. We got this, I'm going to send Kevin out there. Kevin can do all this stuff. Then I write up a document, Kevin's work order, and he runs out there and he does it. And he does a good job because he always does. Okay? But Kevin is focused on, at that point, installing the new solution. Okay? He is not concerned about your existing data. Now, one of the requirements of the project could have been integrate with the existing Oracle database. Okay? But that word integrate, Bob, how specific is that?
Yeah.
Right. So Kevin integrated it. The customer list pops up. When I hit that customer drop down, there's all the customers. But what we were envisioning is a different level of integration. So what happens is, as the specifications come down to those of us that work for a living and implement systems, details are lost. Critical details are lost. Then the project goes on and maybe Kevin or someone else hits a roadblock. It turns out that we have to upgrade this piece of the hardware that we have. So all the attention is on that after a while. Notice no one's worried about the data anymore. Now we're worried about the new equipment coming in, getting it. Okay, we have connectivity. Okay, we're good. So these are the kind of things that happen all the time. Scope creep on a project. That eats up the budget quick. And again, it rarely looks back on your existing data. When people install systems, they typically have the focus of the tasks that they're providing. One of the reasons there's different people here at Simplex is we have different specialties. Our disciplines are different. Everyone here can do everything, but do they know all the nuances of everything? And the nuances are what get you. So we have people come in from the outside, they put in this new lovely system, it's great. They achieve their result, project is a success. But then we look at it and we go, well, wait a minute, I thought this. It always happens on almost every project. I thought this. Didn't we get that? No, we just talked about that. They said, who said? Then you go through your emails and everyone sits around. But worst of all, at the end of the project, they're typically brutal. Big projects are brutal. They take a lot of life out of you. You're tired. Who wants to go there and review everything again at the end of the project?
And part of the challenge also is you have what we call the geological digs. These are pieces or parts of systems or applications that have been added over the years, and they've changed because of the personalities involved, the people involved, or even the technology involved. Before the meeting, we were having a conversation. We were talking about upgrading from ADO to ADO.net. Okay, well, you could have a server that is configured to connect with ADO very nicely. The programmers update it to an ADO.net technology. The application is, the server thinks it's fine, the applications think they're fine, but they're horrible connecting to each other. And you have the network people who are going, yeah, it's not our problem because everything looks fine. And the application people, not our problem, everything looks fine. And the database person looking at the database going, yeah, the data's fine. But it's horrible as far as the end user experience goes. Those kind of situations can happen. And then you extend that to, prior to this version of the software, we didn't care what county a customer was in. But from this version on forward, we did, but the old data didn't have that information, the new data does, and nobody cared about it till 2 years after that when we started running reports. You have that kind of thing. And then you also have, the other issue is unhealthy data because no one's keeping it healthy. Data just simply used, there is a certain amount of corruption that will happen to the indexes, that will happen to some of the supporting data, just whether we want to talk about fragmentation of indexes, it just gets sloppy through use. And if no one is maintaining those pieces, parts, and it's very easy to implement those, and it's very easy to monitor those, but if no one's paying attention to that, it's just going to get worse. And so that will be another aspect of it.
Absolutely. There are a variety of tools that we can use to help us monitor the health of our data. We'd like to show you a couple of them. They're technical, but they demonstrate a good topic that we need to be aware of as we proceed with this. SQL Sentry is one of the various database monitoring tools. It's one of the ones that we use to monitor SQL Server environments. It's a great tool, and this is the cloud-based version. We're just going to come near the front of this because there's a lot to it, and I just really want you to see a couple of simple things on it. So monitoring has evolved over the years. Okay, back in the good old day, we used to have, when I first was exposed to IT, there were locked doors. You could not get in there. There was someone that would come out periodically and distribute reports. If you were lucky and you were really nice to them, you could get that person to talk to you about the next report that you needed. And this is how come we're all here. That took months or years, and then PCs came along, blew the whole model out of the water, and we have self-service end users creating reports. That's really the start of the revolution that they had out there. But the important thing is, back in time, we had dedicated people that knew the systems, a lot of math majors, a lot of very complex, geeky people that didn't really have social skills, but they knew systems. We had hundreds of thousands of dollars dedicated to knowing our data platform, supporting it day to day. We don't have that anymore. Then, over time, it's evolved, where we want the systems to tell us when they're sick or not feeling good. And that's kind of the other end of the spectrum. So we have the heavy end, investment heavy, meaning salary, of people. And then we have the system doing it automatically. And we need a simple way for it to do it automatically. What we're seeing now is a shift to the middle area. People still aren't quite sure how to tell you that your system is healthy or unhealthy. I can tell you the variety of dashboards I look at. Don't tell me anything, except that company got the contract. This is a very simple implementation of a health monitoring dashboard. There's no text here. And you guys, I'm a big fan of this product. This is not critical in any way. This is a great tool. But we're using numbers and colors. Again, red, green, and blue. And then numbers. Okay? So that's the first point I want you to get out of this. Bob, hop back over there and go to server details, please. Yeah, that one. Here's the other side of it. Okay? These are all the servers that exist in that environment. And here's some high-level statistics. Very juicy stuff. I mean, I live for this stuff. Oh, that's good. It's telling us exactly what's going on with our server from that perspective. Okay, Bob, switch back to the other one. Yeah, keep them both open. Okay, Ala, which one do you prefer? You own $1 million oil company. Which one do you like?
The colors and the numbers.
There you go. But Kevin just said you have a problem with your data. He said it's unhealthy. How do you see that on here? You don't. You run the company. You call Kevin and tell him to get back out there. Right. But that's true, Ala. So what we do then is we drill down into the more detailed level. Okay? And then even under here, there's many more statistics. What we need to get out of this is that we need to monitor the health of our data, the health of our systems, free disk space, all that stuff. But just like I was saying, where unhealthy data comes from, it comes from people coming in and doing what they were told to do and only being focused on part of it. The monitoring will be the same way unless we stay involved in it. Number one, we have to figure out what tells us what's healthy. Now, I tend to implement a mix between these two. Pop back to the easy. I like easy. That's what I want to see before I've had a cup of coffee in the morning. Okay? Once I get to work, that one's much more palatable. In between, I get email alerts. But even this, what if, from my perspective, my duties at the company, only this much data is required for me to determine the health of the data? Because the systems are supported by typically the infrastructure department, the sysadmins. Maybe they care about this data over there, how much memory is being used, etc. We need to have enough flexibility in our monitoring that we can have the view that's appropriate for us and anybody else using the tool. I personally love details. I can't get enough of them. It's one of the reasons I wear glasses. Used to have hair, things like that. But the details are where you go when you really need to get down deep and solve something. But seriously, when you're running a company or you're managing things, you want the high-level view.
One other thing to point out here is this is a great example of how you can handle some of the anecdotal issues that you get. The anecdotal is when somebody calls up and say, hey, this was slow. Well, when was it slow? 2 days ago. Great, why didn't you call me when it was slow? But here, in this particular case, you can see you can actually specify the range. So if someone can tell you that something was slow at 3 o'clock yesterday, you can look at the range of, between 2:45 and 3:15, take a look at the performance metrics during that period of time. And then let's say that you think that part of it may have to do with a report that's run every second Thursday. Well, then you can compare the second Thursday of this month versus the second Thursday of the prior month to get an idea of nobody complained in March, but they complained in April. What was the difference in terms of performance? Because part of the challenge, and especially is true on the database side, is when your favorite tool is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Let's throw more hardware. Let's add a bigger hard drive. Let's add another processor. And then it doesn't fix it because that really wasn't where the problem was. This gives you an actual, you can just take a look at it as here's the general health, and you can drill further into it to look for the real down in detail. So you've actually got tools that you can work from an anecdotal standpoint or from a trend standpoint. You've got the flexibility.
Right. And Bob had a good point there. The good monitoring tools will tell you what's going on when you're not there. In the past, and as a DBA, I typically have to be watching when problems occur. The tools take away the need for that. I get to go to lunch now, and I can see what's happening. Now, don't in any way, please, think that this is all this tool could do. This is just data that's available through the cloud. It's safe data to be in the cloud, and we're just trying to demonstrate the idea of very simple view, much more detailed view. Okay, this tool is very good. Now, Bob brought up a good point, and it's coming back to me now. Okay, so yesterday I was working with someone that was moving their solution, which is exporting data from an 8-year-old server to a 1-year-old server. Vastly superior processing power on the new server, vastly. The job used to take 3 hours to run, and it took 7 hours to run now. And this is a problem most of us have. So he comes to me and he says, Doug, I need you to tune the query. It's like, oh no, it's not that query, is it? Yep. Okay, well, I happen to know that query, and I know that that database is set to be read-only, so nothing could have changed on it. So nothing changed in what they did. We were just moving it from one server to another. Can anyone guess what was the cause of the problem? You're right, the environment. It's the other activity on the server. It's the other jobs running on the server. Turns out he used to run this export at 2 in the morning, and he's doing it at 10 in the morning now. Well, we have other users. We have other business processes going on. These are the other things that we need to be aware of. None of us exist in a silo, as much as we might want to. The actions of others affect us, and they have a significant impact on the healthiness of our data. Well, if anyone has any questions, please sing out. If you want to stay and chat about anything, I'm happy to do that too, but thank you very much for your time.